Welcome to the Fiery Pro Server and Fiery XF technical overview of the new Total Ink Limit feature for EFI ViewTek, EFI ViewTek FabReview, EFI Matan, and EFI Reggiani that we are introducing in version 6.5. In the previous versions of the Advanced Linearization tool, you were required to print a target that showed 2, 3, and 4 color overprints. You would then evaluate each color combination and enter your desired ink limit value for each combination of inks into the linearization interface. In version 6.5, the advanced ink limit method is being replaced with a more accurate, customizable total ink limit method. You will find no changes on the settings pane in version 6.5, including the options to include the gray balance and the quality control steps. You will also find that there are no changes on the ink limit and linearization pane. On the next pane, instead of the advanced ink limit method found in version 6.4 and earlier, you will now find the new total ink limit method. Here you will find that instead of the multiple fields available that required ink limit entries, there is now a single entry that needs to be made, along with a button to launch the Total Ink Limit Chart configuration tool. A new intelligent ink limit algorithm will allow you to enter just one value and will then use that value to ensure that you attain the largest color gamut and highest quality results possible for each ink and media combination that you select. This process greatly simplifies the selection of your total ink limit value. The initial value that appears in the new total ink limit field is the value calculated by combining the individual per channel ink limit values from the previous pane. Because many printers can now utilize more than 4 primary inks, this value can be greater than the 400% limit seen in earlier versions of the software. You will see that the printed charts have also been updated and now accurately show the ink volumes used for each available ink combination. These charts are generated dynamically depending upon your printer and settings. The column headers display the amount of ink used in each patch in that particular column. The charts for use with EFI ViewTek FabReview and EFI Reggiani printers have also been updated and can now display many additional ink combinations. The number of rows depends upon the number of available inks and other additional settings. CMYK only will produce a chart with the smallest number of rows, while CMYK ORB will currently result in the largest number of rows. Also, instead of the small extensions on each patch to help you detect ink bleed on textile materials, a new style of bleeding mark is being used to help increase the accuracy of your evaluation. In addition to newly designed targets, you will also find that you will now have the ability to customize the layout of the target that you print. Click on the Chart Configuration button, and the Chart Configuration window will now appear, providing you with a number of options that you can adjust to customize your target, making it easier to evaluate. The first options that you see are the settings for the range start and the range end. I'll come back to these shortly. The next option is used to set the step size, or the percentage of ink increase from one patch to the next. You can select a 5, 10, 15, or 20% value for this increase. You can use the step size option together with the range start and range end options to help fine-tune your ink limit evaluation. Here's how you could use these options. Illustrated on the right is the ink limit target printed with the default minimum and maximum values for the range start and end based on the values obtained from the per channel ink limit step. I have changed the step size to the maximum value of 20%. Let's assume that in evaluating the target, it appears that the ink limit is somewhere between 160 and 180%. I can then change the range start and end values to 140 and 200% to include my desired range, change the step size to 5%, and reprint the target. I will now be able to select a more precise value for the ink limit on the media. Now I could simply print the original target range with a 5% step size selected, but depending upon some of the other variables that can be set, it could produce a target that is larger than the available media size. I'll have additional information on this shortly. The next option on the chart configuration pane allows you to select from a list of available patch sizes. You may choose to modify the default setting based on the media size and on your viewing preferences. Spacing between rows is next, where you can select the amount of blank space to include between individual rows from several available amounts, or even to allow no spacing at all. I'll cover the checkbox later and move lower to explore the bleeding mark option. Here you can select to not include any bleeding marks or to include bleeding marks up to a maximum size of 3 millimeters. When examining the printed target from an EFI ViewTech FabraView or EFI Reggiani printer, it is often more important to concentrate your evaluation and base your ink limiting through an examination of the bleeding marks to determine at what ink limit an absence or an acceptable amount of bleeding occurs, rather than by examining the hexagons within the individual patches. On other printers, the hexagon will likely be where you concentrate your examination, selecting a value where the hexagon first disappears within the patch. In the final available drop-down menu on the chart configuration pane, you can select to include small or large hexagons within your patches, or to eliminate them completely, a selection you may choose if you are only using the bleeding marks in your evaluation. Let's return now to the previously skipped checkbox labeled All Black Combinations. If you are working with a printer that uses inks in addition to the traditional CMYK inks, you will have available an additional checkbox labeled CMYK Only. Now let's examine the impact of these two options. Here we have a default target for an EFI Reggiani printer that uses CMYK inks along with orange, red, and blue inks. With both checkboxes remaining unchecked, the default target will include rows of ink overprints that include CMYK plus orange, red, and blue, CMYK plus each pair of the additional inks, CMYK plus each individual additional ink, each possible pair of CMYK and additional inks, as well as all 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 ink combinations that do not include black ink. Checking the All Black Combinations checkbox will produce a target that includes all possible 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 ink combinations, always including black ink, along with 6, 5, and 4 ink combinations that do not include black ink. Checking only the CMYK Only checkbox will produce a target that includes rows using CMYK inks, CMY ink, 2 color overprints not including any black ink, along with single cyan, magenta, and yellow ink plus black. Finally, with both checkboxes checked, the target will include all values from the CMYK Only target along with all 2 color combinations plus black ink. Modifying many of these variables on the chart configuration pane will alter the size of the printed target. On the main ink limit panel, the size of the target that will be generated will be listed. If you set options that will result in the creation of a target that is larger than the media selected in the linearization output device, a warning message will appear on the ink limit pane. After generating and printing the target, the recommended procedure for evaluation is fairly simple. First, look at the uppermost portion of the printed target. Examine the topmost row. This row will include the combination of the maximum amount of ink based on the options that you have selected. Select the patch where the hexagon just disappears, or where an acceptable amount of bleeding is found. Then examine all of the other color patches in that column and determine if there is any reason to overrule your selected ink limit. Note that some of the rows in the column may be blank because they do not include values high enough to populate the entire row. For example, a 2-color row will never be as long as a 3-color row, which will likely not be as long as a 4, 5, or 6-color row. Once you have determined your desired ink limit, enter the value on the main pane, click Next, and proceed with the rest of the linearization procedure as you normally would. We trust that you will find the new Total Ink Limit feature for EFI ViewTek, EFI ViewTek FabriView, and EFI Reggiani printers more accurate as well as easier to use. For additional details, please review the Advanced Linearization Guide located at help.efi.com. Thank you for your time.